a very, very beautiful morning here in Colorado, Breckenridge. I'm Sean Caudry, your host, and my co-host. I'm delighted to have the birthday girl from yesterday, Maralise de Villiers, feeling all shy there, and uh, and together,
Not at all.
and Mara-Lise and I, we are so happy to welcome you into our Mystic Music Rumblings of a Modern Day Mystic, where we get together on a weekly basis, a Tuesday, and we talk all things spiritual, mystic, human, the combination of spiritually orientated leaders, ambitious and driven individuals here to make a difference in the world. And we talk all things modern day mystic orientated and welcome in those conversations. So with that, I would just like to give Maralisa, the birthday girl, a little bit of an opportunity to say hi to all of you.
Yeah, it's amazing. I can't believe it's already our third week, Sean. We started this 3 weeks ago, and so welcome everybody. We are loving this conversation. I hope you are too. I was very fortunate to celebrate my birthday yesterday. I have been on this beautiful planet for 47 years. And actually, yesterday was really quite special because it's sort of my first proper birthday since moving back to South Africa after 18 years in the UK. And actually, I was sat in Stellenbosch yesterday having breakfast with my sister and realizing that I was actually born in Stellenbosch 47 years ago. So it was just such a moment where you're like, oh my gosh, I feel like I've come full circle and back in my birth town. And just for me personally, the most beautiful place on the planet. So happy to be back, and just my house is just full of flowers, and it makes me so
So
happy. So
happy.
thanks, Sean.
Beautiful, beautiful. And that's such probably a great segue and a great positioning of just how important it is, and for a modern day mystic. We're not typically great at celebrating ourselves. We're not typically great at allowing the radiance of who we are to be seen, to be brought forward into the world, and to really just embody and own the absolute magnificence of who we are. So even birthdays can be sometimes a little challenging to celebrate. And I just encourage all of you out there. It is the day that you are incarnated into this world, onto earth. And I'm very big on birthdays and big on celebrating them as you as an
And I
individual
think
comes into
just
being.
I love that you say that, because I think for me, only in the last, I'd say, few years, I've learned how important it is to celebrate. There's
Mm,
sort of a saying, what you praise raises, so if we don't celebrate ourselves, if we don't celebrate small wins along the way, you lose that. It just sort
ah,
of evaporates, so it's so important. I think it's such an important lesson that I've learned, particularly in the last couple of years. It's even the smallest wins, the little things aren't the big things, the little things are everything. So even like I was literally just yesterday, just taking the day off for me was a bit of a negotiation with myself. So it's so true what you're saying. Yes, so true.
uh, And important signals, you say that, and then we'll get into today's topic, but important signals to the universe is that when we're not celebrating either ourselves and embodying ourselves, and when we're not celebrating the small things in life, we're not signaling to the universe that we want more of that which we're enjoying. So celebration is a huge gap for very spiritually orientated people, because we tend to want to just get after the next thing. And we have
Yeah.
this whole thing around feeling arrogant and struggling with visibility. And this is a great segue, in fact, into today's conversation. And today's conversation, we're going to have a big focus. Maralise and I are going to delve deep into the concept of self-selection. And how come are we delving into this concept of self-selection? I want to just remind you and just go back a little bit into the first video that we shared, and or conversation we had. And there we mentioned that modern day mystics have a few characteristics. And how do you know that you are someone who fits into this kind of bucket of modern day mystic? And so I just wanted to reiterate some of these things, because we're going to be delving deeply into these concepts going forward. However, I wanted to say that many of these concepts hang off very much this concept of self-selection, and where we struggle with the themes that I'm going to just position shortly is because at a very young age, we were not taught how to select ourselves. So let's just quickly do a recap of the themes that spiritually orientated, ambitious, driven individuals will come up against. First of all, really having a beautiful relationship with your power, a relationship that is made up of respect and integrity and clarity in terms of how powerful you are. And very often there will be a lot of mixed feelings around being powerful and then fully expanding and presenting yourself as powerful. And I want to just contextualize when I talk about power, we're talking around your quantum power, your godly power, that is merged and embodied into your spiritual and physical and human gifts, and then the full expression of standing embodied and confidently in your space of authority and bringing forward all of you into the world. With that being said, we have other themes. Typically, we find that, that people who are very spiritually orientated really grapple with voice. So one of the characteristics is finding voice, and I'm talking around the actual expression, the expression of your message, actually getting clarity on your message and the essence of your message, and then taking a stand for that message and standing in your message and then bringing that forward. Many of you will be familiar, for example, you'll watch people on their stages in the spotlight, or politicians, or people that you're inspired to in terms of leadership. And why are you inspired by them? It's because they're taking a stand for something. They've cultivated their essence of their message. They then are able to formulate the actual messaging, the verbals, and then they're taking a stand in the public forum for that. And so that's another mechanism or another characteristic. Then to build on that, we're going to delve into the idea of abundance. Let's talk money specifically. Money, which for many spiritually orientated people is very difficult for many reasons. And so even just saying money and wealth, just pay attention to yourselves, what comes up for yourself, to actually own and want and desire large amounts of money. And so important, because I'm not going to go into it now. That's for another day. But money, abundance, and wealth is a very difficult and testy topic for a lot of mystics, and is tied into just conversations around value and worth, and not feeling like you are valuing yourself and able to ascribe a monetary value to that. And then let's talk around, very importantly, visibility and actually coming out and being visible. Another very difficult area for the abundant or the modern day mystic to stand in, the visibility, which goes and links into the expression of voice, with a deep sense of always feeling. It's linked to a deep sense of feeling through their lives like they didn't belong, like even their sort of psychic abilities that they used to express as kids or growing up or had, were kind of seen as witchy and were not accepted, and no one taught you how to kind of really embody those and bring them forward, but they're actually spiritually gifts. And so your desire for oftentimes facing just various experiences in your life, which potentially got you shunned, ostracized, exiled, made you not belong. So now you live a life where it's very difficult and it becomes confusing. You're confused in your sense of self as to your sense of belonging, and just being in your complete authentic expression of yourself, and feeling comfortable in that, and that you do belong, and that's not something different to you, and not being afraid of that. So it comes with we have through our lives experienced lots of compromise, lots of people pleasing, difficulty in boundary setting. So these are just some of the topics that we're going to discuss going forward. But I'll just round it off to say this is all very much linked with this concept that we're going to delve into today, and the rest in our time together today, and the concept of self-selection. So Marilise, I don't know if you want to add to any of the themes that I've highlighted.
Yeah, I think I can use myself as an example. When you talk about the voice and the message and taking a stance, I mean, my whole brand is roar. And so it's
Yeah.
all about, facing the difficult conversation with yourself. So for me, it was sort of taming that inner bully And then having the courageous conversations with other people. And for me, it was facing the actual bully at work. For 4 years, I worked for a bully in the workplace. And, in the process of being bullied, I actually started bullying myself. So the whole me taking a stance was through roar and, empowering people. That whole thing about calling back your power, taking that stance for something, speaking your truth, and courageously roaring. So I can very much relate with that. I think the visibility with that as well, I think comes with that you taking that stance. I then went on to do a TEDx talk to share my experience. I think the area where I would love to explore more, and for me, where I feel like there's really and still some blocks, and I'm being vulnerable here, but it is around the abundance, about money, and about the mindset, wealth. So I'm really very much looking forward to dive deeper into that, mostly because I think I can learn so much in that space, and still we're all on a journey, and there's always a new level and a next level. But for me, I just wanted to sort of position what sort of resonated with me with everything that you said. But this whole idea of self-selection, in terms of, why did I become a chartered accountant? I mean, because it was expected of me, like not expected. I thought it was expected. I thought it would give me some security in life, but it was probably the furthest away from what I should have done with with my life, So I think it's a really interesting, that whole societal expectations and that whole decision-making power being taken away. So let's explore that a bit more, because I think, you wanted to sort of explain a little bit more what we mean by self-selection. So let's go back to the drawing board.
Back to the drawing board. Great. Well, I think we'll kick off next week's session or next week's conversation. We're talking money and wealth. We can actually spend a couple of weeks on it because it's a massive topic. And it stems from, so whatever you are grappling with, and is really stems from this concept of self-selection. So this is a concept that I started delving deeply into probably about 2 years ago. So as Maralise explains with herself, and for myself as well, so often, probably I'd say 90% of the population ends up going from school into varsity into, sorry, Oliver's agreeing with me. He's my beagle, and he's having a lot of barking this morning. So if you can just welcome his voice as he steps into the arena with us of this conversation in the background. So getting back to this concept of self-selection. So many of us got into, let's say, careers or went to varsity, we studied something, and many of us were very unfulfilled. I know certainly for myself, I thought the only thing that I was capable of studying was something called human movement studies. And that was very much tied to a sense of identity, being an athlete and professional athlete, and sort of at school looking at the subjects that I took. And really just through my life, like kind of thinking, I'm not capable of doing anything else except this thing. And my psychological assessments came back with, to be involved in sort of body movement. And, so I had all these assessments and etc. And I just feel like many of us were sort of got into jobs, got into studying, and currently are still in jobs, not myself or Maralise, because we've chosen differently. But I know many of my clients, this is the conversation I'm having with them, and the grappling with coming into sense of like, I just want to feel alive at work. I want to feel alive in the expression of my work, and I am my business. And that's whether you're in a job or whether you're working for yourself. You are the extension of your business. You are your business. So I went on a deep dive into this concept of self-selection. And what I came to realize is that, we were so programmed from the time, let's say, that we were, 3, 4, and it's happening even younger now because kids are going to school at the age of 3 or 4, I don't know, grade 0, 0, 0. And what I realized is that our decision-making abilities and choice-making abilities were fundamentally taken away from us, intentionally, unintentionally. I'll leave that open. from really the age of 4, 5, 6. What do I mean by this? What I mean by this is that from a very young age, it was left to someone else to decide for us what we were good at, what classes we could go and take, what sports teams we would be selected into, what we were selected into at school, the A class, the B class, the C class. When we wrote exams, we were selected into, whatever in South Africa it was, like you received an A, B, C, D, or you got 80%, 70%, 30, whatever it was. We were selected into, by doing different psychological assessments, you selected into, someone else selects you into the university that you're going to. You can apply, but someone else selects. When you're in your corporate world, someone else selects for you what bonus you're going to receive. The human capital departments are benchmarking based on what? Benchmarking roles that are man-made, and then benchmarking that certain roles get paid a certain amount within a band. And so someone else made up the rules for benchmarking, and someone else selects you into the skills that you bring get marked into this pay grade. So all along our lives, and I played professional sport and squash, and unfortunately I was really good, but whoever selected me saw my skills and decided that I was going into the first team or into the South African team or into the world team, etc. But they never sat me at the table and said, hey, we're seeing some skills. We're curious as to your choice. Like, what do you think? What are you deciding for yourself? Whatever. It's just someone sits behind a closed door, meetings go on, and then, you called in for the meeting, and either you're in the South African squash team, or you've received this bonus, or you've received this job because you've been successful. And so it's a very interesting construct then to see how disempowered we become from a very young age to tune into our intuition, to tune into our choices, and then to be invited to the table where we're actually taught to initiate the conversation. Like if I had been taught from a very young age, because I was very entrepreneurial, and I'm going to come to you now, Marilise, I was very entrepreneurial. So despite an amazing sporting background, which inherently got me into various teams, I was super entrepreneurial. I was doing all sorts of things. I would collect, at those days, Coke bottles, glass Coke bottles, and in those days you could hand your glass Coke bottles and then receive whatever, 5 cents, 10 cents. It was rands back then, as an example. And so I would receive money like that. I'd go and collect all the Coke bottles, or we would have little I would take little erasers, where you erase pencil. I'd cut them up. So I'd buy the full one, then I'd cut it up and I'd go sell it at school, the little pieces. And if someone had invited me into the space to start cultivating, say, hey, like, you're taking this initiative. How do you build on this initiative? How do you build on your entrepreneurial skills? And now what's happening for you? How do you start, like, well, how come you're thinking like that? But no one ever did that. So I ended up going on then a trajectory which I fitted into certain boxes. And so I share this because if you think about yourselves and how disempowered, how difficult it is for people to initiate from a place of intuition, to initiate and have choice and decision making, we've had to teach ourselves. Why? Because someone else decided for us, and it's someone else's filters, someone else's beliefs, someone else's benchmarks of what your value is going through their filters. So for many of us, when you talk around money, for example, like the idea of getting excited about you and money and what you want to charge for your services and what you're going to initiate into the market, because that's what you feel the value is, and you're so excited about it. Like, it's difficult because you're so used to someone else deciding that for you. And so you've got to tune into what fucking excites you. Around what do you want to charge for that session, and what excites you, and go put that out there. So that by way of introduction is the concept of self-selection. Would love to hear what your thoughts are, Marilise.
You've raised so many thoughts with me and actually reminded me of so many things. Because I had very entrepreneurial grandparents. So I was growing up with a grandfather, on my mother's side, who was very like he's always a businessman. Had like a shoe shop. He built like like a office block in Stellenbosch, and in the 60s, and sort of rented that out, type of thing. So he was very entrepreneurial. My grandmother was always, baking for the is it home bakery? I don't know what it's called in English, but it's called Taste Naverheid in Afrikaans.
Yes.
Anyways, but with my grandmother, we were always like making. So we would pick up like these broken shells in our harness, and then we will make these like, with and I don't even know the English term. It's like rimpies. You'll make like these necklaces with broken shells, and it was very trendy those years. Or I would make scrunchies and sell the scrunchies at school, and at university I'd made my own birthday card, a range of birthday cards, but it was always a hobby, and when you were talking about that entrepreneurial spirit, I'm like, oh my gosh, because I always think about myself as an accidental entrepreneur, because I'm like, I've done the corporate thing for 16 years, and then I stepped away, not because I wanted to, but because I felt like I was forced out because of the toxic situation at work. But actually, maybe it was my soul having this conversation about, actually, you know what? Maybe you are more suited. And then I became desperately unhappy in my work situation because that there was a different path for me. And there was a moment in my corporate career where, there was always this idea that I want to become a partner in this big four firm that I was working. And I was always like, following non-traditional paths. So I would do training, I would do behavioral change consultancy, but it's never quite fitting into the box of, okay, clear route to partnership, right? So I kind of always try to kind of do it in my unique way, but because it didn't fit the rules, as you say, and the parameters and the criteria, and I couldn't really quite fit into this box, it was just always, a struggle. And it kind of makes so much more sense now. But I think it's so amazing for people, and especially younger people who are navigating this corporate setting. I think there's so much value from actually learning and hearing from people like us who have been through the same motions, and actually feeling empowered. That word empowerment and that sort of self-selection to be able to say, this is what I really want. So it's like really asking yourself, what do I want? We went to my son's information evening, so he has to choose his subjects now for the next 3 years. So he's 15. So final 3 years of school, he now needs to decide what he wants to do with his life. And I'm like, who knows? At the age of 15, and where are all the subjects around business, around STEM, around, entrepreneurship? There's just such a gap for me in that space, So yeah, lots of things that you've prompted for me, and it's amazing how you remember these things, when you hear someone else share their experience.
Yeah. It's just so profound. This is a profound. I mean, we could spend probably a couple of weeks conversing on this. So, something we can continue into, and I'll always pull it back to the follow-up conversations. But let's just get to the grassroots of it, right? The grassroots of it is like the universe, source, the divine, has no cooking clue that you're a doctor, and that doctor gets paid X amount. The universe doesn't operate like that. The universe doesn't just say, has got no cooking clue that that's teacher, and as a teacher of whatever, high school, you can only get paid so much. The universe didn't put those rules in. The universe didn't put the rules in to say you're a coach, and because you're a coach with 5 years experience, you can have this much. And Marilise, you're a coach with 7, so you can have this much. And then, you know what I mean? Like, the universe didn't put those rules in. These are all man-made. Somewhere along the line, from a very young age, we bought into the man-made rules of benchmarks, the man-made rules of you are valued at this much. where
Mm.
I used to sit in the conversations, and I mean, I love HR practices, and I understand the need for benchmarks and all of that kind of stuff in the corporate setting, but the implication is just so vast. And all I'm encouraging you to do as you're listening to this conversation is, what have you bought into, and what
Yeah.
are you buying into about your value? And this is why it's so difficult, and why value and abundance and money is such a big topic, and fitting in and that kind of stuff, because someone else, some other big body, I don't even know where benchmarks come from originally. Like, can we actually find the source of
Yeah.
the body of people who decided these were the benchmarks? And now, which every human capital company organization goes to, we got to benchmark this, and you are benchmarked. So you can see how we are, like, so when you start buying into this concept, and whether this ascribes into, culturally, which, if you, for example, you do mountain biking, who's your benchmark? Who can you mountain bike with? Whatever. If you just start looking around at how much you bought into them, who have decided for you where you fit and belong, and what level and what skill and how much money you can have, and not, you can see just like, ah, the grapple then with now having to come back into your sense of self and your sense of authority, and you putting a value on you, and then you
Mm.
taking initiative in the context of either having the conversation with your boss to say, my soul wants a 15% increase, because my soul knows that I'm worth way, or if you're an entrepreneur, this is what excites me, this is the value I want, whatever, $500 an hour, it really doesn't matter. But learning again, and the idea, and so what I encourage you to take away from this conversation is, you've got to start going back and tuning into what excites you, what number excites you. Take everything else away,
Mm.
and just sit quietly somewhere and say, what number excites me that I want to get paid every hour of every day? And start tuning into your, invite your soul to the table in terms of what excites you, and just start playing around with that,
Love
and use the what excites you and what delights you as your mechanism now, as the entry points to start exploring what it is that truly brings you alive. Because the thing that I am seeing, and it's a pandemic all in itself, is the lack of aliveness in people. Aliveness in terms of a love for life, a love for myself. I used to walk, and I absolutely love my old company, and consulting before I left South Africa. I was, went across various industries, and obviously it was similar to you, spent 13 years then in my organization. But wow, I used to like just watch as I'd listen to the language, and people were just like dead man walking, dead woman walking. Like, the lights were on, but no one was home. The aliveness was very, very infrequent, that you would actually like see someone like like excited, and like
Yes,
so excited
absolutely.
about this, whatever. It was very, people were exhausted, and the language around exhaustion would, when I first started my career in banking, and I would walk in the doors, and people were pretty enthused at the beginning of the year, and halfway through the year you'd hear the conversations, oh, I'm feeling tired, and certainly by the last quarter it's like, I can't wait for December. Well, it was interesting to watch the trajectory of those conversations. Like, people would go on leave in December, and they'd come back in January a little bit invigorated, and I can assure you by March the conversations were like, I'm just fatigued, I can't work, like, I need a holiday. And so now that for me is very symptomatic of more and more disconnect from true expression of self, and the aliveness of the expression of what I'm truly capable of. So just
Yeah,
throwing that in the melting
and
pot.
I think that's super relevant, especially because you and I both work with corporates, people who are, you know, leaning into that, creating that life that they absolutely love, and the joy and the aliveness come with that, and it's also about making your whole life work and being your whole self. Being that person now, we say be her now, be him now, and living into that new identity now and becoming that individual. But I think what I see and what I know is something I'm also working through, is that whole conversation around, I a limiting belief, I think, around, I cannot make money doing what I love, because there is
Mm.
this contradiction with, being. So I almost studied music, after school. And I always think 2 weeks before I went to university, I swapped from music, from piano to chartered accountancy. And I think
Wow.
my biggest rationale there was like, because I have a future being an accountant, I don't have a future being a
Wow.
pianist, necessarily. And it's that, so as you say earlier, that the universe doesn't know, and there's no reason why I should have believed that. But there's a general, people watching now would say, but Marilise, you made a good decision. Because obviously, I probably would become a music teacher, and it would probably not be a financially very viable. But that's the limiting conversations that's going on in all our heads. So I guess, and I'm conscious that we're already half an hour, so we said we're going to keep these to half an hour. But I want, if you're watching this, if you're listening to the replay, I want you to really tune into what is that limiting conversation, that unhelpful narrative that you have kind of going over and over and over in your head, which is actually really a man-made rule, frameworks, benchmarks, as Sean say, that has really created this lie that you've bought into. And whether you can start creating a new narrative, a new story, a new identity. I think that's really super helpful exercise to do.
Definitely. And we're going to
Yeah.
delve deep into what you're talking around. Ultimately, the biggest loss through the self or the disempowerment of someone else selecting us, the biggest loss is the loss of trusting ourselves, trusting the
Yeah.
divine, and trusting life. That, and Marilisa, I would just ask you, have you seen wealthy piano teachers around the world? Do they exist?
Of course they do. Yes.
So there we go. So
I know.
so the filter, so just for all of us, it's, I'm in my own journey, having moved to the States, like around reestablishing income wealth. So hence just such an important conversation as we delve deeper into it. The important thing is when we disempower ourselves and we give our power away to someone else deciding your value, your skill set, etc. It's through their set of values, it's through their set of beliefs, and it could be there as an individual or they as a collective. Someone else's set of values, someone else's set of beliefs, someone else's set of how they interpret the world. It's not your soul, and it's not you. And the journey back home is starting to ascribe and putting value to who you are, the gifts that you bring, and what is that monetary value. And like I said, it's a big disconnect for a lot of spiritually orientated people. We're going to delve deeply into those conversations in the coming weeks, and we will keep weaving back this concept of self-selection and how important it is to reinvigorate that as you come into the journey of the journey home in terms of what's possible for you.
Love that. Sean, that was amazing.
So
And
great, Marilise.
wow, people could probably see this is not scripted at all, because it's just
So,
like, we wanted this to be natural. We wanted this to be a conversation. We have a theme that we talk about, but we have no idea what we're going to tell you. So we are being vulnerable. So thank you, everybody, for holding space and for being with us. We really appreciate that. And if you love this and you've not subscribed yet, please do subscribe, because it will improve the visibility of our channel, and obviously invite more mystics into the conversation. That's ultimately what we would love. And we will see you same time, same place next week. Thank you
yeah,
so
look
much for
forward to seeing you
joining.
all. Have a beautiful day,
Bye.
everybody. Cheers, Marilise. Lots of love to all of you. Bye.
Lots of love. Bye.